Hi, Tim2Wheels here. Have you ever been curious about how to install a HeliCoil thread repair kit? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how. So stick around, we'll get started right after this. All right, so my little project for today is repairing a stripped thread here on my upper fork clamp or triple tree, whatever you like to call this. So obviously I've got this off the bike, so I've removed the upper triple tree. A while back I was working on a project and it required me to remove the fork tube. So what happened was in this upper right hand bolt that goes through here, I torqued it too tight and it stripped the threads out. Or I'm sorry, it actually broke the tip of the bolt off. So the bolt was stuck in the threaded portion. For those of you who know, on this back side, it's not threaded, it's just smooth, so the bolt slides through and then threads into this rear portion, and then of course tightens this clamp against the fork tube that's in here. So anyway, I had to try to back this broken thread out, or broken bolt out, and long story short, ended up having to try to drill it out. And when I drilled it out, the drill got off center, and as you can see, it kind of boogered up my threads here in this. So when I was done with it, it would no longer tighten up or hold or support a bolt being torqued into this. So for a while, I did a cheap fix, and I just put a longer bolt through with a nut on this back side. And it worked. It provided the clamping to this, but it wasn't right, and it always bugged me that it wasn't right. So what I'm going to do now is I bought this HeliCoil kit, and this bolt is an 8mm or M8 with a 1 1/4 thread pitch. So I bought this kit that's made just for that size, and it comes with a bunch of inserts as well as a special HeliCoil tap. This is not a regular tap for threads, and then the insertion tool that goes here. And I'll show you in detail how this all works, but here's one of the inserts, and as you can see, it's got this little tab here that or tang that it uses to screw this into the thread. So we're going to drill this out with the appropriate size bit, and then we're going to tap it using the HeliCoil tap, and then we'll insert this in here. So when I'm done, these are stainless steel thread replacements, and so it gives you a new, harder threads than the cast aluminum. So I'm going to put that in here. You break off the little tab, and then we'll be able to use a factory bolt. I've ordered some Kawasaki OEM bolts, and I'm going to put one back in here, and it'll be as good as new. So first step is we're going to drill this out with the appropriate bit, and then we'll go through the process of installing the HeliCoil. On the packaging, it'll tell you the drill bit size that we need, and in this case it is a 21/64 inch bit. So we're going to use that. I have everything centered up, and what we're going to do now is just to drill down in here and to get this set. Let me center this just a little bit. Turning this at about 300 RPM. So very slow when you're drilling metal. Even though this is aluminum, I could go faster. I'm just going to take it nice and easy and just work those bits out of there, or the threads out. Okay, so now I have my HeliCoil tap and a tap wrench, and I'm just going to be very careful to hold this, and I'm trying not to block the camera, but it may be hard because it's more important to get this straight than to get a good shot. So I'm just going to get this started as straight as I possibly can, holding pressure. And it's starting to cut the threads here. I'm just leaving it in the milling vise just to give me a good sturdy solid work surface to hold the workpiece. I'm trying to use the top of the mill as a gauge here to keep it lined up. They kind of self-right. If you're close, it'll line up as it cuts its own threads. You just don't want to get too far off. And there we go, it's starting to line up now, and so I don't have to worry as much about keeping it straight up and down, so I'm just focusing on turning it slow. And as with any tap, you want to be careful if you're starting to feel it bind or the chips. You want to back it off occasionally, like so, and then move forward just to clear out any of the chips. These helicoils are used a lot for, especially on KLRs, for stripped oil plugs. I had an issue a long time ago. Well, when I first got the bike, my oil plug was leaking, and I actually drilled it out and tapped it for a bigger size oil plug as opposed to using a helicoil. At some point I may try to put a helicoil in the oil plug drain because it still leaks just a little bit. I'm going to look underneath in this crack just to see when I get through here, and backing it off occasionally and just working my way down. This is a pretty good sized tap, so I'm not too concerned about breaking it, although I have dealt with breaking smaller taps like 1/4 inch, and it's a real pain to get these out because these taps are hard stuff. You can't really drill them out. Now, if I didn't mention it earlier, the reason I'm fixing this is because HeliCoil is a heck of a lot cheaper than buying this whole assembly. The OEM assembly is about $230, $250, depending upon where you get it. So before I spend that kind of money just to fix one stripped bolt, I'm going to do this. I'm going to use a small blade, or you can put a small screwdriver or something in here to see when I start to hit that bottom out. It's definitely getting a good bite, so even though it was stripped and drilled out, there was enough material to still get cut a good thread in there. So we're far enough down now, and we're starting to poke through the gap here. I can feel the tap with my knife blade. I don't want to go too far in, but we're in enough to where it's straight through. So I'm going to have plenty of room to put that HeliCoil in. And ideally I'd like it to be seated in the center of this. So when we drive the HeliCoil in, you'll see that I like to get it about down to the center so that it has good bite. In the leading edge, you want it at least like a half a thread below the surface, and this will be more than that. Now, normally your bolt would go in the way that you drive the HeliCoil in, but in the case of this triple tree, I can't drill it out because of the front piece. I don't want to make that bigger. So I'm putting the HeliCoil in from the back side. Threads still are in the right orientation, so it shouldn't be a problem. So you can see the nice new threads that the HeliCoil die or tap cut into the material, and we're going to flush this out, and then we'll drive the HeliCoil in. So the HeliCoil is this coil, and it has this little tang in here, and on the insertion tool you'll notice there's this little lip or this cut here that grabs a hold of that tang in the HeliCoil, locks into it, and so then as you turn it, it drives the HeliCoil in. So we just simply thread the insertion tool into our HeliCoil, and you'll see that tang, that notch, come around and lock into the HeliCoil, and that's what allows you to drive this coil into the threads that we just created with the tap tool. So let's go ahead and now insert that. Okay, so with the HeliCoil started into the threaded area here, I'm just using my insertion tool to just gently thread it into the threads. And you'll see that tail of the helicoil has just started to go underneath. So I'm going to drive it in just a little bit further. Because normally you'd stop a half a thread in from the side the bolt's going in, but in our case the bolt's coming in from this direction. So I want to take it a little further into, see, now I'm looking down into this crack. It's going to be really hard for the camera angle to capture that, but I can see it with my eye. I'm taking it in until I feel it starting to tighten up at the bottom of those threads I cut. Okay, so it's getting pretty snug there. So I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to back out the insertion tool. And the insertion tool is out. And I don't know if you can see this, but try to hold it at an angle. You'll see the helicoil is inserted, and you'll see the little tang sticking out. Now the next step is we're going to take a small punch and knock that tang out and break it off at the break point. And then we'll be done, and we'll see if our bolt threads into that. Okay, so next I'm just taking a small cold punch, just that'll fit down in this hole, and I'm going to use a small hammer and tap that there. Maybe hard to see, but that is the little tang that broke off at its designated break point. So just as advertised, that punches right out. So now we have a clean open path for the thread to go into. So next I have my genuine OEM Kawasaki part, the bolt, and we're going to test the threading to make sure that it goes in the hole. So here you can see that we have a clean path for the thread now. So now I have my genuine Kawasaki OEM part bolt. I ordered a couple of these just to have, and I'm going to thread these in. I ordered those off of a Rocky Mountain ATV and had them here just within a couple of days, which is pretty cool. So in the first insertion, it's a little stiff, the threads, so I threaded it in from the back side, and then now I'm threading in from the front side, keeping an eye on the helicoil, and the coil is not turning, and the bolt is going smoother now. So just want to test threading before I get it all back on the bike in case I have to redo it again. And that coil is not moving at all, which is cool. So it's gripped into its threads. And we're all the way through the helicoil now and starting to tighten up. So it's working just as it should. And from this point it feels like it might turn by hand, and it is. The helicoil I can see is clearly still seated in its proper location. And it held. So that's nice. So now we'll put the triple tree back on the bike and be good to go.